Can you imagine living in an airport? Not for a day or two, not even for a month, but for a full 18 years? This is a true story stranger than fiction. It's the story of a man who turned the airport into his home, becoming a symbol of loss, waiting, and suspended freedom. Today, we tell you about Mehran Karimi Nasri, known as Sir Alfred, the man who inspired Hollywood movies, and who lived inside a Paris airport without leaving for many, many years. In 1988, Mehran Karimi Nasri, an Iranian man, arrived in France with hopes of claiming asylum. He had lived in many countries before but felt that France might be his refuge, a place where he could escape the turmoil of his homeland. However, things did not go as planned. Nasri's story began with an unthinkable twist. When he arrived at Charles de Gaulle Airport, his documents were questioned. He claimed to be an Iranian refugee, but his paperwork had been lost during his travels. Without the correct documentation to prove his status, he was left stranded in the airport's transit area. Over the years, Nasri's predicament became more complicated. He was trapped in a bureaucratic nightmare. The French government couldn't decide whether to grant him asylum, and his country of origin didn't want to take him back. As the days, weeks, and eventually years passed, Nasri's journey inside the airport turned into an absurd and tragic saga of waiting, hoping, and living in limbo. Life in Charles de Gaulle Airport became his new reality. Nasri spent his days sitting on benches, wandering the terminals, and trying to make sense of his situation. He was given minimal resources, relying on the airport's limited amenities and the kindness of strangers for food and supplies. He wasn't alone in his loneliness. Over time, he became a fixture in the airport, almost as much a part of the terminal as the luggage carts or the signs. Travelers passing through would often look at him, wondering who this strange man was, but very few took the time to understand his story. The airport, with its endless streams of passengers, became his universe. He observed the comings and goings of people, creating his own little world among the bustle. He even had a small space where he kept his belongings: old newspapers, a few personal items, and a stack of books that helped him pass the time. Despite his growing isolation, Nasri remained calm and composed. He spoke to no one for years, keeping to himself, but at times a passing traveler would share a brief conversation with him. His circumstances seemed like something out of a strange novel. As the years passed, Mehran's story began to attract media attention. Journalists, fascinated by his bizarre and tragic situation, started covering his plight. It became a headline in French newspapers and on international news channels. People from around the world came to the airport, curious about this man who had been living there for so long. For many, his story symbolized the cruelty of bureaucracy and the human cost of political systems that failed to acknowledge or address people like Nasri. He was, in a sense, a living embodiment of the helplessness of those caught between borders without a place to call home. Yet Nasri never seemed angry about his situation. Instead, he often spoke of his longing to go to the United Kingdom, where he believed he would find acceptance. However, his legal troubles and the intricacies of immigration law kept him stuck in the airport. The airport became a paradox. It was both a prison and a sanctuary. Nasri had a sort of routine, waking up each day, reading, writing in his journals, and talking to the occasional visitor. The terminal became his life. By the late 1990s, Mehran Karimi Nasri had become a fixture in Charles de Gaulle Airport. He had been living there for nearly a decade, and the world seemed to forget about him. But for Nasri, his life was the airport. He learned the nuances of airport life, the best places to sleep, where to get food, and how to maintain a sense of privacy amidst the chaos of daily travel. He even gained some sympathy from the airport staff, who came to know him by name. They'd bring him food occasionally or offer him small comforts, though his life was far from easy. His legal case remained unresolved. He would sometimes see lawyers and human rights advocates who tried to help him, but they were unable to cut through the red tape of immigration laws. In 2006, Mehran Karimi Nasri faced a sudden health crisis. He was taken to the hospital with heart problems and high blood pressure. His body, worn down after nearly 2 decades of stress and isolation, was starting to show the toll of his strange life. He had spent 18 years in the airport, and now it seemed his health was beginning to fail him. But it wasn't just his body that was in distress. Nasri had spent so long in the airport that he had come to see it as his home. The idea of leaving it seemed impossible. He had formed a strange bond with the space, and when offered a chance to leave for a shelter or a medical facility, he hesitated. The thought of going into the outside world, after all these years, was daunting. Despite the help offered by the French authorities, Nasri was reluctant to give up his life in the airport. He had found a strange sort of peace there. It was his refuge, even if it had been forced upon him. Eventually, Nasri was moved to a medical facility and away from the airport. He spent his final years in a sheltered environment, where he was cared for and looked after. However, his heart remained at the airport, the place that had defined his existence. In 2022, Mehran Karimi Nasri passed away in a Paris hospital. He had become a legend, a symbol of the human cost of border politics, the forgotten man of Charles de Gaulle. But his story is more than just a tale of tragedy. It is also a story of survival, of resilience, and of a strange, haunting connection to a place that never truly let him go.